Let's start off with the second section of the course, which is the CSS debugging. We'll be using the same site for this section. So for the CSS debugging part, mainly we'll be using the styles panel of the DevTools. The styles panel gives us lots of functionalities and options in order to debug the CSS that we have on the different elements on the site. So we'll start off with the first upper section of it. We have here a filter field. So this filter field allows us to filter the different rules that are applied on the elements that we have on the site. So let's say that we have this header element. We want to filter a certain selector. We can just write the selector itself here. So if we write .main -header, we can see here that we filtered only the rules that have this kind of selector, which is .main header. We can also filter by a property or a declaration or a value. Let's say that we want to filter the Z index. We are interested in finding the value of that Z index. We can just write Z index. We can here have the declaration here. It's like this is the rule that has this declaration, and yeah, we can just write whatever value. We can just write a certain value by itself, not just property or selector. To the right, we can have the element state toggler. So if we click on it, we have lots of options here. For example, if we want to toggle the hover state, we can just enable whatever state that we want, focus, active. To the right of it, there is this CLS, which is the class. So this gives us the elements that are applied on the inspected element. Like it gives us the classes that are applied to that element itself. So here we have this header. It has two classes which are main header and header -- global. You can see here that the applied classes on that element are shown here. We can just disable or enable whatever class that we have, and the changes are applied directly to the element. Also, what we can do here is we can add an element, so or a class. For instance, if we want to add a class named text primary, for example, we hit enter. We hit double enter in order to apply that class. So here we can see that the text primary has been applied to that element, and here's the rule of it. To the right of it, there is this plus, which allows us to add a new style rule. It's just for the inspection purposes. If we want to try out some styles, some things on a certain element, we can just hit that plus button, and then instantly a new selector or a declaration gets, or a rule, let's say, that gets added to it. So we can just do whatever we want with this. It's just for the inspection purposes. It won't be reflected on the actual code. To the right, we can have common rendering emulation. So for example, if we want to toggle a certain emulation for like a dark, if a user prefers a dark scheme, for example, we can just hit that, and then if there is any dark like media query, color scheme media query applied to a certain element, we can see the like it emulates a dark settings for the browser. There is also this cool option here that we have, which says automatic dark mode. It like got introduced recently into DevTools. Basically, when we click on it, it will convert the site into a dark mode. This is actually pretty cool. So this site became like dark instantly without us having to add any dark styling for it. It's actually pretty good. Like it covers lots of the cases. Like, you know, there might be some places here and there that are not working quite well, but generally, without having to code anything, it's pretty cool to have. So to the right, we have this computed styles sidebar. If we click on it, what this basically shows us are the elements or the styles that are computed or applied to a certain element. So for example, if we have this header here element, these shown styles that we have are all of the styles or declarations that are applied to that element. So for example, if we take a look at that color element, we can see that since we've applied the text primary, which gives the element the primary color, which is the red one, we can see here that the applied element is the red one. So if we click on that little arrow to the left of it, we can go to the place in which this computed style is taken from. So this rule applies that color for it. Here we can also filter the different rules that we have. If we are interested, for example, to see the, for example, the font size only, we can just write font size. Here it's filtered. We can also here click on this little checkbox, which is show all. If we click on it, we can see all of the styles that are applied to that element. To the right of it, there is this, let's just expand this. There is this group. If we click on group, it will group all of those computed styles into different segments. For example, here we can have the layout properties, we can have the text properties, the appearance, the animation, whatever. Also, you know, like this section here gives us the different boxing properties that are applied to that element. For example, we can have the we can see the margin here that is applied. There is a margin bottom of 24 pixels. There is a 1 pixel border applied to it. There is this padding that is also applied to it, and we can here see the width and height of that element. Okay, so let's take a look at a tip or a trick that might come in handy regarding the contrast of an element. So oftentimes we are working with styling of a page and the styling of a certain element, and we are not sure if that color that we are using for a certain element is matching the color, like the appropriate color contrast for it, like if it's matching the WCAG AA or AAA standard, for example. So let's take a look at that element, for example. Here we have this element, which is just a normal text element. So here we have the color value that is applied to it. So this color, if we just open this color picker that we have, so as you know, here we can just select any color that we have, and you can see here that it gets applied directly on the page. So let's just Control Z to get back to the original color that we have. Okay, let's take the color here that we have. So you know, like we can just here play around with the opacity and change the color, but what's cool, well, like the cool thing about this panel is that Chrome introduced a new contrast ratio information about that element or that color. So basically what it does is that if we click on show more, here we can see Chrome has added two lines in this the color picker itself. So what it basically means if we move above that color or above that line, we are not following the proper contrast ratio. If we move between those lines, if we just stay in this range or in this area, we can see that all of those colors that are actually compliant with the contrast ratio, which is 4.5, which is the AA standard. If we move below that range, if we go just down here to the darkest areas, we can see that the AAA standards are now applied. So here if we move like to the extent which is the black, we can see that the contrast ratio is 19.26 and the appropriate AAA standard for it is just 7. So this is pretty handy to have. And also there is this cool option, like let's say that I have this color which is 8888, and then I want to find the nearest compliant color for it without the need to change much of the appearance of it. Like I need to have the nearest color that is compliant with the AA standards. Here there's this cool option which allows us to use suggested color to fix the low contrast. So if we click on that, it gives us the closest possible color that is above 4.5 for us. So this will be compliant with the AA standards. It's worth to mention that this option doesn't always work with the Chrome. In some areas you might not find this contrast ratio, but if you were able to find it while you are debugging, it will come pretty handy. Also, to the bottom here we can see that we have all of the different colors that are applied to the element. Like from the style sheet, it takes the different colors that are existing, and it allows us to instantly select between them. So if you are like commonly using certain variables, certain color variables for your site, and you just want to play around with those colors to see different options that you can have, it's just there for you to choose from. Also, if we take a look at that color, let's say that I am not interested in seeing the hex representation of that color. I can just hold shift on the keyboard and then just click on that little box to it. Here we can see that we can change the representation of that color. For example, if I want to see it in RGB, I can just choose RGB and then I can just use that value for whatever purpose. For the purpose of color contrast, this is like another topic that is more of a big one, but let's say that I just want to check the contrast that I have on the page that I am eager to just debug and check. There is this cool extension which is called Arc Toolkit. You can just download it from the Chrome extension store. Basically what it does, it gives us lots and lots of topics to run some tests on, to check, for example, any accessibility issues, to check for keyboard interaction. But what we are interested in here is the contrast topic. So if you choose contrast and you hit run tests, we can see here that it gives us the different contrast issues that we have on this site. you can just go and check, like we have here about 11 errors where there are insufficient normal text contrast issues. You can just inspect over any element, and like here it gives you the site. Like sometimes it might not work correctly if you are in a certain state, but generally it's a good tool to have in order to debug the contrast issues that you have on the site. Okay, so let's just take a look at a handy shortcut that you can have in order to change the values that you have for the different properties. So for example, if we have this nav link, let's say that we want to add font size about 16 pixels. Just move this down. Okay. So let's say that I want to play around with that value. I don't want this 16 pixels. I want more or less. I can just, change that value manually. I can just hit, like, write whatever value that I want. But let's say that I just want to play with it manually in order, like, gradually until I find the right value that I want. We can just use up and down arrows to increment or decrement the values. There is also another shortcut that we can have. If you hold control and you click, let's just hold control and you click up and down, we can increase the value by 100 values or units, as you can see here. If we hold Alt and we click up and down, we can increment by a decimal. If we hold Shift and along with the up and down, we can increment by 10 units. Also, on this styles panel that we have, we can right click over basically anything on this, and it will give us a couple of options to have. So we can right click on this rule and we can copy selector, we can copy the whole rule, we can copy all of the declarations of that rule. We can just right click over a declaration by itself. We can do many things, like for example view the computed value here for it. So one of the common issues or challenges that we face on a daily basis while we are debugging the CSS that we have, which is the debugging of the Flexbox. Flexbox is a cool feature that got introduced into the CSS, and it just basically changed the whole game regarding the layout or how to just present the items of the page and deal with them. So let's take an example for this element. Here we have a list item and it uses display flex. So let's just say that we want to debug that flexbox for it, and we want to tackle some issues regarding it. Here on the right of that element, we can see that DevTools is giving us this flex option. If we click on it, it will show us the flex representation of the items. And if we move to the right of that declaration here, which is the display flex, if we click on the Flexbox editor, we can just play around with that, with those properties of the flex. For example, if you want to display it as a column here, if we want to align the items to be to the right or to the baseline or to the center, we can do that. And also, if we take a look here, we can see that those elements that we've played around with, they also get added to that rule. So it's not just for demonstration purposes. These values actually gets applied to that element, and then we can just copy paste them and insert them into our code base. Another thing that the Chrome DevTools allows us to use, which is if we have a grid, for example. So previously we covered Flex, and now we have grid. For example, this div uses the display grid that we have here. We can also have the same options that we can play around with. But if we go to the right of it, there's this grid option. Like oftentimes we are dealing with grid and we want to see how the actual placement of that grid area that we are laying out. We want to actually see those areas and columns and rows for it. So if we click on this, it will show us the how this grid is being laid out. So here we have 6 columns, as we have here 6, and also we have 3 rows. As you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, and there is this 4. So yeah, for me, I find it personally, I find it very handy to use. Dealing with the grid isn't an easy thing oftentimes, and this tool makes that job easier for us. Okay, so another thing that the styles panel has, which is the original source of that rule that we are interested with. So this grid hero dash dash horizontal is actually a representation of a rule that is written into our code base at some point. So here we have this link to the right of it, which gives us the original source location for that rule. So this rule is originated from a file called grid-hero.scss. We are using a CSS for our code base, but it could be any kind of file, any normal .css file, or if it's just an inline style or a style tag that is part of the original HTML. So here, if you hover over it, we can see the place in which this file is coming from, which is components, grid hero, gridhero.scss, and the line number, which is 455. If we click on this, it will take us directly to the place in which this rule is applied. So here we can see like we have this media query and this rule that we are interested into. At some SAS libraries, if you are not using the latest one, which is Dart SAS, which I think that most of the modern frameworks are using now, the old one, that the deprecated one, which is the Node SAS, it doesn't have that accurate source map. So for example, if you just click over here, it will take you to a whole another place that isn't actually the place in which this rule originates from. But if you are using the latest one, which is the Dart SAS, it's like much accurate than the old implementation of the SAS library. So having to, let's say that you are working on a CSS bug, and each time that you are playing around with these elements, you just go to this element, you click here, you go to the sources panel to check where this rule comes from. But there's another alternative, an easier alternative, in order to navigate through the different sources that you have on the page quickly. If you open the command panel, Control-Shift-P, and then you just write show quick source, you hit enter. Here what we have here is something that is called quick source panel. So if you are just doing your normal thing of navigating through the source code and you just click over, for example, let's go take this reboot rule. If you click on it, it will highlight to you the place in which this rule got originated from without the need to move to the sources panel and then highlight it for us. It's just there for us for ease of use. Okay, so let's just take some issues. Let's just debug some issues that we have on the site to see a couple of options that we can use in order to solve those issues. So here we have let's move to the code base that we have. So here I defined this new file which is just for testing purposes. I called it card-test.css. So this file contains basically two rules. One makes an anchor link, which is a part of this parent selector to be blue. Another element which just, for example, gives a font size of 1000. So basically those two rules aren't actually applied to the site for some reason. That's the bug that we have. So if we check this rule, if we go here to the site, we take a card. This is the card that we have, and then we move to that anchor element which is in the card content, the card meta here, the category, and then we just check the anchor element that applies to this condition. We can see that it doesn't have this rule that we've just declared. So there must be a problem. So it's either the like there might be a typo, like there might be a certain element that isn't applied. For us, the elements are applied correctly, but the rule isn't applied. We can also check here that actually what this selector means. So this dot card means that any element that has a class of card and it has a specificity of 0, 1, 0 if you are interested in it. For example, if we hover here on the card meta, we can see here how this rule applies for the anchor element that we are interested in. So it gotta be a child of card meta category and a card. So this is available in VS Code if you are using it. Into our case, we have all of those rules correctly, but for some reason this blue color isn't applied. So it might be an issue that this whole file isn't included as part of the main bundle. So why not we just check if this class, for example, is already included into our site. So what we can do here, like, it's not easy to search for a certain class in order to check, or a selector, for example, or a rule in order to check if it exists or not. But one thing that we can use is that we can just go through the build CSS that we have, the final CSS that is loaded within the web page. For example, here we have this. If we go to the sources, we just click Ctrl P in order to open any file that is loaded on the page. We have this build.css, which is the file that gets built for us from the CSS that we have. So if we go to the build.css here, and then here is the basically all of the main CSS that this page has, that is part of our main bundle. If we check for that class, which is card-s-f, you can see that there are no results for this. What that means is that this file isn't included as part of the main bundle. That's why this class isn't showing for us. So it gotta be a problem with the inclusion of this file as part of our main bundle. For us, it was just a matter of including this file. So if we just add this file, we just click save, wait for Webpack to compile the CSS for us. We just hit refresh once again. We can see here that the blue color just got applied. Let's just zoom in to better view it. And also here the card-s-1000 is also included as part of our main bundle, and here is also the card meta category anchor tag. Okay, so if you just inspect that element, we can see here that the card meta category A, the rule that we've applied or written, is just here as part of the card dash test, which is what we are looking for. Another thing that we can use in order to find a class or a selector, let's say just a class for this example, like if you want to instantly find if a certain class is existing on a certain web page or a part of a bundle, we can just go here. For example, let's take a look at this icon search that we have. You can here open this classes, that the panel that we've introduced previously. So this allows us to add any class. We can just write card-s-1000 for this purpose. We can just check if this class like gets toggled or not. But let's say that this icon dash search, we want to change that icon. We want to, for example, instead of having it as icon dash search, we want to display a heart icon, for example, for any kind of reason. What we can do, like instead of looking at the documentation and or like check our code base or go to the build and check for that class specifically that we are looking for, which might be bothersome process, instead we can use this classes, and then let's just remove those. Then we can just write icon dash. So what's cool thing about this is that Chrome DevTools gives us auto completion of the different classes that are included on the page or loaded. So if you just write heart, indeed, yeah, there is the class that we are looking for. So this is pretty handy to have. You don't need to bother with the process of finding the class that you are looking for. You can just add it here and it will show instantly. Okay, so you might be wondering how, like, I am working locally on my machine. I am applying changes and then those changes are shown instantly on the page that you are working with. It's not a local host, it's a production environment. So this is the section, like this is the fourth section of this course that we will be covering, which is how to override the resources in order to instead of using the sources or the resources of the actual page, we can replace those resources with local resources or whatever resource that you want in order to debug and have better control over your website. So that's pretty much it for this section, which is the debugging of the CSS. Here are some handy shortcuts that you can use. Those are some of the, or most of the items, if not all of the items that we've covered during this section. Some handy shortcuts. I encourage you to start getting used to them in order to enhance your productivity while debugging the CSS.